I'm Justin Glaw, writer and journalist, and I've spent my career chronicling the violence, unrest, and chaos of American life. On this podcast, I'll discuss the events roiling this complex and troubling country and speak with some of the people trying to make sense of the madness that pervades our world. This is American Doom. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the American Doom podcast. Today I'm talking with Asawin Suebsaeng, who is a writer and reporter for Rolling Stone on everything Trump world and DC swamp and politics. In addition to his stellar reporting, though, I'd like to point out that Swin is a great writer and a great thinker about this particularly troubling American moment. And I'd encourage you to head over to Blue Sky, where he's active now. That X is a cesspool of right-wing misinformation, and follow along with his work because he's really doing some important things that really do something that I try to do at American Doom, which is speak to the immediacy of this moment. So please join us. And also, for those of you watching and listening to this, the best way to keep up with my work is at my weekly newsletter at american-doom.com. Quick note, running an inauguration special here for a little bit. You can get access to, behind the paywalls to all the exclusive reporting and content that I produce there for $40 a year. So hope to see you there. Let's hit it. Swin, what's up? Thanks for joining me. Welcome to hell, I guess. Let's start with talking about your inauguration day, where like that's what you described, right? This is hell. I am living in hell. There's no way out of this. Which kind of leads me into like some of the stuff you wrote on Blue Sky this morning where, you know, reporters are like, oh, well, this is exciting and fun again because now it's total chaos and we get to do all this fun shit. This is decidedly not fun or good. So tell me about the hell that you experienced on Inauguration Day and then the hell of the past 5 days here now that we're into for the first week of the Trump administration.
Well, first of all, Justin, thank you so much for having me on.
Sure.
And I guess I'll start by briefly addressing what you said earlier, where yes, there is something in the air where some elite beltway and otherwise political journalists or columnists, TV people, all of them of that ilk, not obviously not everybody involved in those professions, but there certainly is a strain of individual who practically openly is thirsting for how quote unquote exhilarating or exciting or and debauched in how in the sheer tumult of when Donald Trump is president, and oh, our jobs are going to be exciting again after 4 boring years of Mr. Biden. And I started covering Trump and Trumpism when I was solidly in my 20s. I am as guilty as sometimes succumbing to that as anybody else, especially over the course of my drunken and wasted portion of my mid 20s.
Yeah.
Um, but even then, there was like a unique horror to it that I pretty quickly stopped realizing was um, when I started realizing it was absolutely not funny, even though I tried to paper over it with as much
Mm-hmm.
personal dark humor as I could, especially when he became president as a form of sort of professional and personal Novocaine to
Yeah.
what I was seeing the country being having its guts pulled out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but the kind of me being a little piglet, like consuming the empty calories at the trough of Trumpism and the first Trump administration, I got at least the little bits of that out of my system in my 20s. I'm an old man now. I think I
Right.
qualify as an elder millennial. I'm in my mid to late 30s. I don't have time to fucking like be impressed with like the horror show anymore
The
or to find
chaos.
new or yes or chaotically titillating or anything like that. I got kids now, and not to sound corny, but not just for my fellow countrymen and women and everybody else in the country, but I also care about how they're going to be in life in the near and long term. And I find this all psychotically boring.
Right.
And I don't understand people, especially people who are my age or older than I am, who work in quote unquote elite news media in this country who feel any differently. I think there's something um, uh, uh, moderately sociopathic about that. And this little preamble that has actually gone on a little bit longer than I was expected to, but you got me off of it when you mentioned the Beltway media. Actually fully encapsulates how I felt reporting from Washington D.C. and downtown D.C. When I was covering the days leading up to and the day of the second inauguration of President Donald Trump. He and
Right.
his fellow band of gratingly boring psychos have a chance to run the table. The country is theirs. They got the federal judiciary, especially the Supreme Court. They got a trifecta control in federal government. The Democratic Party leadership is effectively defanged and demoralized for at least the short term, and kind of giving into this strategic retrenchment of trying to work with this president as much as they feel they can. Um, it's a I mean, there's no polite way to say it. It is a bleak period. Maybe it gets better later in the coming months or years. I wouldn't necessarily fucking count on it. Uh,
Hmm.
but the premise of the piece that mixed my reporting, including from Washington, D.C., around the time of the inauguration, and also my perspective, and I think I can fairly say Rolling Stone's perspective about what has gone down, not just in the past few days or months, but several years, is that I think the headline was something to the effect of everyone who was supposed to protect you from this failed miserably. Everybody.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody in a position of influence or power, whether it be in federal law enforcement, the Biden administration, and his and other Democratic campaigns, the Republican Party, including people in positions of power like Mitch McConnell, who openly know how much of a pathetic and disastrous and shambolic threat Trump is, but let him do it anyway.
Right.
People like you and me, unfortunately, in the media, maybe not necessarily you and me. I don't want to like be too self-deprecating on this, but definitely the media as a institutional Borg, or however you want to define it. Um, Obviously, people in corporate America, but it's not like that they were actually out to protect anybody anyway. I could keep going on and on and on and on. I don't want to bore your audience too much.
Every institution failed.
There isn't a single one that didn't help, whether inadvertently or intentionally, get us to this point. And the point in history we're at is, look, it's easy to describe it as appallingly stupid and kind of funny in a really, really, really grim way. Like for
Yes.
part of the story, it involved me sitting at the January 19th victory rally at the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. It's in the Chinatown area of it for people who don't know. Trump spoke there. Kid Rock performed there. Elon Musk was there. So many of the heavy hitters were there to wow the crowd of Trump fans in the arena, which I think fits like 20,000 people,
Yeah,
tens
that
of
sounds right.
thousands.
It's like a
Okay.
hockey arena, so that's
Yeah,
about right.
yeah. I've seen the Rolling Stones there, Paul McCartney, Elton John, The Who, Metallica, and now fucking Kid Rock.
Kid Rock. You see
Kid
Kid
Rock and
Rock.
Donald Trump. Fucking hooray. Um, and there's a point in the night when Trump is wrapping up his speech, and everybody who has been following this up knows what's going to happen. The village people are going to come out. They're going to hit the
Right.
stage, and they're going to regale the crowd with the YMCA song, which became Trump's 2020 and then 2024 campaign rally song.
Sure.
And
Makes total
everybody in
sense.
the crowd, you're not literally everybody, so many people are doing their version of the stupid Trump hand gesticulation
Right.
dance, if you can call it that. Trump
Yep.
does a little bit of it, but for most of it, he's kind of gently swaying, but almost kind of just standing there with a
Sure.
stupid semi smirk on his face or whatever,
Uh-huh.
as like within feet of the village people as they're just doing this. I think that it's like DJ style. There's no like, I didn't see a
There's no
band
band.
behind
No.
me. And just looking around with the crowd, gobbling it up, and everything that this moment meant and came before it and led up to it. I could not think but anything else beyond if this is the way the American empire crumbles into the silt. There is no other way that it could have possibly happened beyond the host of NBC's Celebrity Apprentice retaking power to the tune of a live Village People act. Like, there's just something uniquely, grotesquely American about how cheesy this like Trumpified version of fascistic American impulse is manifest.
Cheesy and stupid and cheap and nonsensical and feels like just sort of like an absurdist comedy and or acid trip,
There's
right?
no
Like
other
that's how
way. Yeah, there's
there's
no other
no
way.
other way to describe it.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
there's
no
many
other
ways to
way.
describe it, but generally bad is how to describe it. And like what I appreciated about what you wrote from there is that essentially what I have felt what you felt when you wrote that story, which is essentially some variation of what else do you want me to say as a reporter, as a writer, as a journalist, whatever title we want to use. What else is there to say about this? This is fucking crazy. It's obscene. It is, I feel like I'm crazy here watching all of this and that we're all just sort of pretending this is normal. And from a journalistic perspective and an institutional perspective, I guess, too, it seems insane to sit where you were sitting and watching what you were watching and do the kind of institutional legwork of like, oh, well, let me go in to talk to Cindy and John from Toledo and see what their thoughts are about being
Yeah.
here today, right? Let
Why is
me,
this shit? Why is this shit on C-SPAN? Like
right.
this is the equivalent of like a snuff film, like except for the American constitutional order, maybe.
So yeah, so I mean, like, how do you like? That's kind of one of the things that is part of everyone failed miserably, right? Because there were other reporters there, and I've had to do this myself. I've had to go to a Trump rally and talk to people and do the reporting thing. John and Cindy came from Toledo to like say, "Oh, we love his thing about gonna lower the price of groceries or whatever," and
Yeah,
like you have to
season
write that
6 of
down
The Apprentice.
credulously.
Yeah.
You have to write that down credulously as if we're not in some sort of totally bizarre alternate reality where like this whole thing is basically fucked. And like that's what I'm saying, like how do we kind of like and your piece mentions the other people, the other institutions that have failed, the Democratic Party trying to work with people, media trying to cover the Trump administration as if this is just some sort of normal thing. Like how is that still happening, I guess, is my question.
Well, I mean, it's in part happening because uh, a lot of these individuals just don't have a choice. This is the American reality we live
Mm.
in. So, like, what else is there to say? Now I'm not trying to exculpate anybody in the elite, especially not the elite, when I say something like that, because there is a choice to live with something and adjust to it. Because accepting this is who we are now, we don't get to say now that Donald Trump has finally won a plurality of the popular vote that quote unquote this is not who we are. This is who we are.
This is who we are, right?
There is, if we're to be honest about it, there is nothing more American than a Donald Trump
Right.
presidency. Um, but there's a difference between so accepting that as a concept and reacting to it, and accepting it and then surrendering to it, giving into a form of cultural nihilism, or just allowing yourself to be beaten down and having uh, and doing the administration's work for you. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yes, it does. And I mean that's why like, there I mean obviously I don't want to make this about beltway journalism, but I mean it just is insane to me that I see reporters who are the White House correspondent for whatever, CBS News or whatever, and they're writing all caps scoop. And then Donald Trump says that all these companies are going to invest all this money in AI infrastructure. And I'm like, what are we doing here? First off, there's no. This is a very specific example, but let's take a beat on just acting as a press release stenographer for the Trump administration until some of these things actually might happen. I mean, if you remember the Foxconn deal from the first administration, it was how many thousands and millions of headlines about Trump's going to
Yes.
bring all these
Yeah.
jobs to Wisconsin. Nothing ever happened. I mean, some did, right? Like 150 jobs, but like we're right back into that. Like we have forgotten every single lesson of the first Trump administration as the media, and we are just right back into that sort of, you mentioned that piglet feeding off of the chaos. And like, that's just insane to me, right?
I love that you brought the Foxconn thing because I remember as look, I don't think I'm anything special. I'm just an idiot who Rolling Stone magazine was dumb enough to hire.
Yeah.
At the time, I worked at Daily Beast. You and I had
Yep.
written, reported for both news outlets, and at the time, again, idiot who was still in his 20s, um, uh, late 20s, I believe at that point, could figure out that this whole thing was built on aggressively dumb sand. The
Yeah.
Foxconn deal that Trump had struck was just a PR move, and it was clear from the get go that this is bullshit. Like,
Yep.
he's doing this for the headline. He's not actually going to help the workers with this, to the point where I think the union leader said something to that effect, like when the deal was made, trying to be
Hmm.
like warn people in the media. And then Trump started like directing his 2 minutes hate brigade at this guy. And then,
Yep.
like you said, within weeks or months, not just 99%, but 150% vindication came out. It's like, okay, this was bullshit. He didn't actually strike anything, and he just wanted the fancy headline and knew that people would breathlessly reported it, even if they didn't particularly like him.
Right.
And it it's one of those things where there are a bunch of people, whether they consider themselves non-ideological or maybe culturally liberal personally, but they always go out their way to be like, oh, that doesn't affect my professional output or whatever, who will often talk, perhaps privately, about how, like, why are so many millions upon tens of millions of voters falling for this stuff? And I guess one of my answers to that question is, well, you did.
Right.
So, like, what are we even fucking doing here?
You continue to fall for it every time. And anybody who doesn't understand this, I don't understand how you can't understand this. The entire MO of Trump's whole life has been big splashy press release and event about project that's going to go great and it's going to be the biggest best thing ever, and then everybody goes and covers it, and then the whole thing falls apart and fails spectacularly, but it's too late because the press release and the event are already in the information bloodstream, and the good news is already out there. So by the time that the bad news hits, it's already too late because there's been a million headlines about how Foxconn was going to bring all these jobs, or how SoftBank and these other companies are going to invest. You know, first it was 100 billion, now it's 500 billion. The other day Trump said, "Well, maybe I'm going to get them to do 600 or 650 billion." We're just throwing numbers out there now like it doesn't even fucking matter. So this leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is like the aspect of like all this PR stuff on the immigration
Mhm.
thing, the immigration push that's happening, the executive orders and all this stuff, and then also the birthright citizenship stuff. Obviously, these are serious threats to like democracy, but
Yes.
there's also an element like you wrote, I think today or yesterday, where this is also just like a PR thing. Explain kind of where that comes from.
Sure. You're referencing a story I put up at rollingstone.com at some point during the Biden to Trump presidential transition. It was just peeling the curtain back on what we had uncovered through our reporting on what some of the anti-immigrant plans were for the immediate initial days of the second Trump administration. And look, as you pointed out, there's a lot of awful things they're doing right now, or at least quite a few really bad things that they're doing or starting to do that the Biden administration, as atrocious as they were on this issue, were not doing or refusing to do. That's abundantly clear, and it's even clearer that Trump and his lieutenants in his administration, whether they're Stephen Miller or Tom Homan, you name it, they definitely want to build up to a militarized scenario, potentially involving a new network of camps in different parts and desert in America to house
Yep.
people before they can uh, get them the hell out of this country.
Run by
Um,
private prison companies that'll make a mint off of all of this also.
of course, of course, of
Yeah.
course, they should be very excited about these scenarios. So
Right.
if they ever achieve this uh, nativist fantasy of theirs. And let us be very clear: this is not hysterical libs projecting anything. This is not based on a leaked memo that anybody can say on the Trump side is fake or whatever. This is them talking about this stuff for the past 2 years on the record,
Right.
laying out in detail. This is what we want to do. Now, who knows
Correct.
if they'll get the entire pie, but they're gonna go for as much of it as they can. So we'll see how far they get. But even if they got to that uh, um, um, uh,
Net
vision,
it's almost like net zero immigration. Like it is
yeah,
just quite literally just stopping all legal or illegal immigration, unless of course it's like, I don't know, beautiful blonde women from Germany or something like that.
of
Like
course,
those would be the only people allowed in.
yeah, maybe get a few Danes in there as well.
Sure.
No Irish, a
Right.
1000% no Scottish and Irish. Maybe like two and a half Italians.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but to get to that hyper militarized, expansive point, they all know that if they're going to get there, or even anywhere close to that, they're going to have to work up for it. It's going to take time. So for
Yeah.
a long time, even before Trump was reelected, he and his people were gaming out. Okay, how do we start the new administration by filling in the gaps as we are trying to build up to all that stuff, which could take months, if not years.
Yep.
So, one of the major things that they've been plotting rather meticulously is how they are going to create a as massive as they can propaganda blitz at the very start of the second Donald Trump presidency to
Yep.
try to create as gigantic a chilling effect as they can in the country, which they hope, with the help of not just conservative media, but also more otherwise non conservative, traditional, and mainstream media, social media, influencers, Trump's own megaphones, you have it. They're going, and they've already started doing this. You can clearly see this happening, including but not limited to how they keep tipping off, like Fox News, to help generate photos and images and video on the news that they really want to be there. They're trying to flood the zone with this idea that if you may or may not have the correct papers in order, Trump and his goons could be knocking on your and your family's door at any moment. Now,
Right.
things are not good. I'm not saying things have not gotten worse from what they were on, say, January 18th, 2025. But what they are trying to do is trying to scare as many people who are thinking about coming to the United States right now, or families that are already here, and getting them to think twice about coming, or I should pack and get out of here so I don't risk my family getting separated, my kids
Right.
taken away, or maybe flee the specific city or state, or maybe even go to a different country. Um, um, rather than risk what may or may not be coming. The
And to
administration
also
is
get
really
the
hoping that a ton of families do their work for them, and that's what's
right.
really going on.
And also to get the public relations win of a greatest hits of ICE raid videos that will play on a loop on Fox News, so that all of the Trump people in the base and everybody who's voted for him and the American right can look at that and say, look at all the stuff this guy's doing. He's actually doing what he said. He's kicking these people out. And
Yes,
I'm
even
sure that,
though even
go
though a
ahead.
lot, even though quite a lot of what is being plastered all over places like Fox News right now is a hyper MAGA PR version of things that have already been happening.
Already been happening. They're just
Oh,
inviting right-wing reporters along for the ride now when they do the regular raids that ICE has been doing.
yeah,
And that was my understanding of what was going to happen in Chicago, right?
yes, but
Because
like
leading up to
people,
the yeah,
uh, any one of your listeners or viewers can Google ICE press releases for when Biden was president about them
right.
doing arrests of multiple people in sanctuary cities or places like
Yes.
Chicago or New York City. Like it happened pretty often, and oftentimes it wasn't controversial at all because even though they were doing it in places like Democratic dominant cities or sanctuary cities, they were sometimes arresting people who nobody in the country basically disagrees should be arrested or maybe even deported.
Right.
Like that stuff.
Bad people.
Yeah, but the difference is Biden was not going out there every day with the press release in hand, telling the cameras, "Look at
And he
how
wasn't inviting Fox News to bring their cameras to film. And
exactly."
that's what my understanding was of what was going to happen in
Yes,
Chicago, that it was going to be normal operations. But this time we're going to invite the local right wing media people to come along for the ride so that they can film this thing. And like, that is
yeah,
what is so like, look, there are bad things happening and they are getting worse on the immigration front under Trump, and they will continue to get much worse as we get to sort of that nativist militarization that you're talking about. But this is also, like you mentioned about the rally, this all comes with just a side of like cheap stupidity, where
yes,
it's like the same things that are happening, but it's a big splashy thing that's, covered in gold because Donald Trump is saying it is, right? Um,
yeah.
and so let's wrap up with I guess your thoughts on like how to avoid uh, becoming that piglet or becoming distracted by the shiny thing, and to keep your eye on what's really happening with the other hand, as it were, and maybe give us a sense of like what you're doing and what you're working on that front.
If you're a reporter who's privileged enough to be in my position, or your position's Justin, and I'm obviously not talking at you when I say this because I know you're doing stuff like this, you front of mind for the next 4 years at minimum needs to be on the palette of things you're doing coverage of the numerous victims of Donald,
Yeah.
because there are a lot right now. There were a
Hmm.
lot before he got reelected and reinaugurated the second time. And there are going to be a ton and a ton more at home and abroad as he's president of the United States again. So, look, it's going to be a little difficult for me to avoid doing at least some reporting um, uh, in the coming months and years that has to do with this little piece of melodrama or this like in
Palace intrigue or Musk versus Trump or whatever. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's going to be stuff like that that I'm going to have to cover, and quite frankly, is going to matter to varying degrees. So if we're talking generally speaking that stuff, sure, I'm as guilty on that as so many other people in this decadent national political press of ours.
Hmm.
All I'm saying is that needs to be counterweighted aggressively with a focus on victims and these pencil pushers who Trump is employing throughout the vast federal apparatus to make these things happen, to make people's lives demonstrably worse, whether it's on healthcare, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on anything else. Like this isn't the game that too many people within official Washington, and I emphasize official Washington. I don't want to call it DC because I love you love DC. You should hate Washington.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
This truly is not the game that so many people in official Washington will never stop believing to their marrow of their bones that it is. And I just do not have time for that horse shit anymore. I
Right. Which is why, I mean, I will recommend that. I mean, a great example of the type of reporting that you are describing here is a story that you did from Iowa about Molly Tibbetts' family, and I think that's a great example of to talk about some victims that you maybe wouldn't have thought were victims of all of this, right? Because we all see Donald Trump talk about people whose loved ones have been killed by undocumented immigrants. And
Mhm.
much of the time, when we hear those stories, we see those families and they're standing right next to Trump and they're thanking him for bringing this issue up. But this story that you wrote before the election shows the opposite of that. That this was a family that felt like betrayed, they felt taken advantage of because of the death of their daughter. And that is exactly what you're describing in terms of focusing on the victims and not whatever palace intrigue or infighting is happening within the White House on a daily basis. So thank you for that. And where's the best place for people to find your work and to keep up with what you're doing right now?
Well, Justin, thank you so much for your kind words on that. Please keep doing what you're doing as well. It's gonna be a long fucking 4 years, and if whether in the print edition or online at rollingstone.com, you can find my and my colleagues uh, work on there. I unfortunately don't get to do any of the fun stuff. I'm never going to be interviewing Olivia Rodrigo, I don't think. But you can find my and my colleagues political reporting there. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm a Blue Sky guy now. I haven't
Blue
posted.
sky. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't post to X now, in quite a long time, I don't think. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I don't really touch my Instagram anymore. But on the social media app, Blue Sky, I'm at Swin24, SWIN 24. Come and say hi. Uh, Help me with virtual tomatoes if you want to.
Okay.
I love a good roast.
All right.
Also, last thing,
Yeah.
if you're a student at the University of Cincinnati and you are stupid enough to want to take one of the uh, classes I'm teaching, I'm now an adjunct professor there. Go Bearcats! Come say
Hell
hi
yes.
if you'd like to. Yeah,
I forgot that. I thought you were there. Now I have a buddy who lives in Cincinnati. I'm gonna hit you up the next time we're up there.
please, I would love that.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Swin. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Peace. Bye. Thank you for listening to American Doom. This podcast is just a part of my work as a writer and journalist. To keep up, or at least to try to, because chaos and speed are the two primary drivers of my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just search for American Doom there, and you'll find the investigations and stories that I cover. Coming up on my newsletter are more dives into election deniers working as local election officials across the country. This is work I've been doing mostly by myself for the last 4 years, and it's not possible without your support. American Doom is the only place that you'll find reporting on local election denier officials. So if you support this effort to protect against threats to democracy, please subscribe to my newsletter, American Doom, on Substack. Thank you.